Coach, good morning. Thank you for the time. How are you?
Good morning, guys. Yeah, all's
Um,
well.
Thank you for joining us. Take me back to that time, Coach, 1998, and Jerry Krause. I mean, that was the most famous team in sports in American culture at that time, and they wanted you to be the coach. What was that time like?
Well, the thing that I guess people don't know about, and I don't even know if they'd be interested in it or not, but I find it interesting in looking at this whole thing in retrospect. Um, in 1988, 10 years before I was hired, that was my first year at the University of New Orleans, and Jerry Krause came up to me at the end of that season. I had never met him, uh, and told me, he said, "Look, I'm Jerry Krause of the Chicago Bulls, and I just want to let you know that you're going to be our next head coach."
Wow.
And that was 10 years before I was hired.
What
And the reason for that was we had a team that did not have great expectations that year, 1988. We were picked last in our conference and had a 6'4" center. And Jerry was scouting a guy by the name of Randy White from Louisiana Tech. He'd watched him play 3 times against us, all 3 games. And Randy was 6'9", 240, ended up being a lottery pick. They thought he was Jerry. In Jerry's mind, he was going to be the next Karl Malone, and he was a good player. But anyhow, they had Brown at 6'9", and PJ Brown at 6'11", and Randy White at 6'9". And anyhow, we were small, and we beat them all 3 times. And after the conference tournament, um, Jerry walked up to me and said, "Look, like I said earlier, you don't know me, but I want to let you know that you're going to be my next head coach."
That is great.
And Jerry always had a coach in his pocket. I'm sure the day he hired me, he had a coach in his pocket, who he was going to hire. And anyhow, he started calling me. It started out once a week from that point on, and then it ended up, the last 4 or 5 years, ended up being every day, and sometimes twice a day.
What?
And there would be hour-long conversations. And he was in 1989, the following year, he wanted me to fly up to the Bulls training camp and wanted me to start running the triangle offense. And I said, "No, I'm not doing that. I've got no interest in doing that." And 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 so he just kept on and on and on. And then about so about 95, 96, word started getting out that, hey, this guy's going to be their next head coach. He's in love with this coach from New Orleans. And so he answered the question to somebody in the Chicago media. We hear that you're at Tim Floyd's game last week, and that this is going to be your next head coach. He said, "No, we're just fishing buddies." And the way that started was, that summer he said, "I've got to get to know you on a personal level if we're going to do this. So I understand you like to fish. Could you teach me how to fish?" And I basically, he flew down here to New Orleans and took him fishing one day, and that was the extent of it. But anyhow, so he hid behind that in terms of not letting it out to me that he was going to hire me. Something else that I think people would find interesting that I've never told anybody. I've told close friends, but I basically take credit for their championships in '97 and '98, because Jerry and Phil, they were at each other's throats, and they didn't like each other, and Jerry Krause never felt like he got any credit, and so he wanted Phil gone, which would have been a disaster. And we had a former player at the University of New Orleans who was playing for the Seattle Supersonics, named Irvin Johnson, 6'11".
Yeah.
And Jerry Krause wanted me to meet Jerry Reinsdorf for the first time. And he said, "Look, can you fly up here to the Seattle series and watch us play? Because I'd like for you to meet Jerry Reinsdorf." And he said, "We can hide behind the fact that, Irvin Johnson's playing for Seattle and we're playing in the finals, and you just, wanted to see Irvin in the finals. And I said, yeah, I'll meet Jerry. So they flew me up to Seattle. Jerry Reinsdorf and I walked around downtown Seattle, and the Bulls ended up winning that series. That was the first year Michael came back. And we're walking around downtown, and he basically said, look, Krause wants Phil gone this year. He thinks that Jerry Pippen's breaking down his back. He thinks that this team has run its course. He doesn't want to overpay these players as they're coming up on their contract years. He wants to move them before their contracts are up, 97, 98, where we can still get value for them, and he can start to rebuild. And Jerry Reinsdorf, was torn because they're winning, but Jerry Krause wanted it over and done with, so that he could go back and basically take all the credit for the next rebuild.
Yeah.
He used to always talk about how the Clippers failed on their draft picks, and that if he had those picks, he could really be something. So, anyhow,
Wow.
I told Jerry Reinsdorf that day walking around downtown, I said, Jerry, I'm not sure Jerry Krause understands these guys are basically the Beatles, and this is the most popular franchise of all time. And I said, if I'm you, I would not do this, and I would not do this. Maybe not even the following year. I said, let it die its own natural death, because there's certain players and certain teams you just don't break up. And I think that these guys have earned the right to let it die its own death. So anyhow, I got back to my job, which was at Iowa State, and Jerry Reinsdorf and Jerry Krause called me, and they won the championship, and Jerry Krause was still hell-bent on breaking it up. And Jerry Reinsdorf said, Tim, will you tell Jerry Krause what you told me in downtown Seattle about next year? And I told Jerry Krause, and he says, I can't do it. He said, you don't understand. I don't want to work with Phil again. And so I said, well, why don't you just do this? Why don't you work downtown and let Phil work out at the other place? And y'all just stay the hell away from each other because it's working. And
what was the disconnect, Coach? Why so disconnected between successful coach and GM?
Oh, I don't think that's unusual.
Uh-huh.
That's the nature of it. The coaches want to be able to pick the players. And I think probably Phil, I do know that this was management's issue with Phil, is that Phil would help negotiate the players' contracts in through the media, which they viewed as stepping outside of the protocol. Phil would say, yeah, they've got to do something with Pippen's contract, or, he'd step into what management viewed as management decisions, players coming back from injuries, contracts, we need to pay this guy, pay that guy. And so that's where the disconnect came, because, Krause and Reinsdorf were married, and there was a protocol there. It was, Jerry Reinsdorf, then Jerry Krause, and then on down to the coach. So anyhow, they kept the team together based on that phone call for the next 2 years.
This is
and
fascinating.
then they ended up beating Utah the following 2 years.
The shot, yeah, absolutely.
And after the first Utah win, it was here we go again. Krause and Reinsdorf on the phone with me. We're going to do this next year, and I told them, I said, you need to let it go again, because life was good for me. Yeah, and life was good for me as well.
Yeah.
We were rocking and rolling, and had good teams at Iowa State, and I wasn't real sure that I was interested in. I knew that whoever came in there next was going to get fired. I mean, that's just the way it was. They were so successful and so great, and that whoever the next coach was, it probably wasn't going to measure it up. But I did think that I was going to have an opportunity to coach those guys, and that didn't work out.
Yeah.
It all blew up, and then I think there's a lot of young guys out there that may not understand a lot of the league at that time. but we were the first team to go young. In those days, guys stayed in college for 4 years. And then it was 2 years after that they decided if they could play or not, when they were 25.
That was the Curry-Chandler, the Eric Curry-Tyson Chandler experiment?
Well, what happened was Kevin Garnett was the first guy, and then Kobe was the second, or vice versa. I can't remember.
Right.
They came out in 96, 97. And that started the wave of high school players. Well, this all coincided with the time that Jerry Krause wanted to break the team up. And see, Jerry Krause was convinced that they could win with, regardless of who they put in there, because he was the guy that suggested that we run a system of play. Jerry Reinsdorf was a New York Knicks fan, and the Knicks had run a system of play when they won with Willis Reed and DeBusschere and Bradley, those guys. So he wanted a system of play. So Krause decided that the guy that could run a system of play was Tex Winter, and he hired Tex Winter. And he was convinced that was the reason they were winning. It wasn't because of Michael Jordan. So when I got there, they forced me to run the triangle offense and keep Tex. And so Tex worked for me, all of Phil Jackson's staff, Bill Cartwright, Tex, and Frank Hamlin. And they were going to run the Tex had convinced Jerry that this offense is so wonderful, wink 'em, blink 'em, and nod can be put in it, and they're going to win. And so Tex, who was had a big desire to be in the Hall of Fame one day and this and that, he went through 1 year of us getting our absolute brains beat in, and decided that he needed to rejoin Phil in Los Angeles the following year.
Yeah,
but,
Kobe and Shaq, right? So wait.
My point was this: we were the first team to go young.
Yeah.
And the payroll went from $77 million to $23 million, which was what Jerry Reinsdorf wanted as well.
What?
He had won his 6 championships. So we became the only team in the league that was young, because to do that you had to take high school guys. Now everybody's young in the NBA. Every team is young, but in those days you're playing against 28-year-old Rasheed Wallace and Karl Malone at 30 and
men,
Reggie Miller and
right.
Stockton and Rick Smiths and you name it. They were all in their late 20s to mid 30s and were just men playing against 18-year-old guys. And we had 26 of the 36 guys I coached never played another second in the NBA after that year.
Wow.
We were trying to build through the draft, and to Jerry and Jerry's credit, they told the media when they decided to blow the team up. They hired me in May. We had a strike. We didn't coach our first game till February. All that 8-month period, I thought I was going to coach Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and those guys.
Oh, no.
And then a week before the lockout ended, the strike, they had a press conference and said, "Look, we're going to go in a different direction," and they got rid of everybody but Michael.
Goodness.
Yeah,
Coach.
Yeah. So
and I mean,
if
you look at Tim Floyd's resume, he's probably considered basketball royalty. I mean, like he's been everywhere, coached and to get a chance, to think that you were going to have a chance to coach that team. It seemed like they were bringing you around before they made the decision to hire you. Krause made the comment last night that he invited you to his kid's wedding. Was that uncomfortable? Did you attend the wedding and being around the team with Phil still there? What was that dynamic like?
It was totally uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and Beverly and I didn't want to go at all. And I, when he made the comment that we were fishing buddies, I'd call him. I'd say, "Jerry, what the hell are you doing? Why are you, just don't mention my name ever. I've got a recruit here at Iowa State, and if this thing's going to happen, it will happen. But please don't show up at my games and sit with my wife and that kind of thing, And
Wow.
So it was really uncomfortable, and I wasn't really sure I wanted to go. And you live life, and you try to live life without regrets. And I really don't have any regrets. At that time, things were different, and I was able to take care of our family. And the college game, guys get fired for, stepping on a crack on a sidewalk. At least some guys do,
Yeah.
Or they can come out and, accuse you of whatever, and you're gone, and your contract is null and void. And I had a 10-year deal at Iowa State, and very, very comfortable. But we were able to be okay the day we signed that contract. They're fully guaranteed, and so I made that choice. And coaches in college weren't making what they're making now. Had it been different, I might have done things different. I almost went to LSU the year before when Dale stepped, and that didn't. Just decided that that's not what I needed to do because this Bulls thing was in the background the following year. So, but anyhow, it was fun, and it was a great adventure, and glad we did it. And it was. I just get sick and damn tired of being called Jerry's fishing buddy because that's what
I hear you, man. You guys would have won it in '99 too if they'd have brought you in as the coach. Coach, we could do this. We could probably spend 2 hours just telling stories with you, especially some John Brady stories and some Bulls stories. He was great on you last night. We appreciate your time, and hopefully we can do this again. Thank you.
Well, y'all could spend 2 hours because you really don't have anything else to talk about.
that's right. Guilty.
That's
exactly right. Don't tip our hand. You're right. Thank you, man.
Y'all take care.
All right,
We'll
Coach.
see you.